Dobrý deň, dámy a páni. Vítajte na úrade vlády.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the office of the government, and I would like to cordially welcome Mr. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg to the office of our government. For me personally, the entry of Slovakia to NATO was the right decision, and thanks to the collective strength of NATO, we in Slovakia can feel more secure and safe thanks to the protection of our allies. And together with the allies, we are in a much better position to face the hybrid threats. What we discussed today were burning topics that are relevant to all of us, but at the very beginning of our meeting, I assured the Secretary General that this government of professionals is not going to change our course in terms of our collaboration within NATO and within the European Union. So we continue with the trends set up by previous governments. That means we want to be a valid, a constructive member of the North Atlantic Alliance. And we want to demonstrate that by complying with our obligations, both in terms of a gradual upgrade of our defense structures, but also in terms of our commitment to our financial obligations. We also welcomed the strengthening of the military presence of our allies in Slovakia. We very much appreciate that the other member countries, NATO member countries, are helping us with their soldiers. We have 1,300 soldiers from other countries in Slovakia, from Czech Republic, US, Italy, and many other countries. I also emphasized that the entire eastern border should be secured very well, and that includes the border of Slovakia. We also talked about the support to Ukraine that is defending itself against Russia, and also to what extent NATO with its joint efforts can contribute to really bringing peace back, a long-term peace for Ukraine, and what we or how we see the events that are expected in this conflict. As you certainly know, Finland has become already a full-fledged member of NATO, and now Sweden is also is much more likely to become a member. So the next summit in Vilnius may be an interesting date where we could expect that the relations between Sweden and Turkey would improve, and we hope that soon after that we will see the ratification of their request to become a member of NATO. And then in our discussions we also talked about comparative advantage of Slovakia in NATO, what is our added value, what are the things that we can assure or we can provide effectively to be a valuable member of NATO. So that's it from me for now. Thank you. Now I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Stoltenberg.
Prime Minister Ódor, dear Ľudovít, thank you for your warm welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for a very substantive meeting where we discussed all the main issues on the NATO agenda as we prepare for the upcoming NATO summit. And it's also a pleasure to be here in Bratislava, Slovakia today, as we also discussed the preparations for the Vilnius summit with the B9 leaders earlier today. Slovakia is a committed and a respected NATO ally. In a more dangerous and unpredictable world, Slovakia can rely on NATO. Alliance planes patrol your skies to keep you safe. And Slovakia hosts a NATO multinational battlegroup to deter any aggression. In NATO, you are part of a family of 31 democracies from Europe and North America, where all decisions are taken by consensus, and we all protect each other, all for one and one for all. NATO is a defensive alliance. We are there not to provoke a conflict, but to prevent war, preserve peace. And the peace NATO has ensured for over 70 years is the foundation for our prosperity and our way of life. NATO also relies on Slovakia. I welcome your commitment to invest 2% of GDP on defence this year, because better defence infrastructure and equipment are a deterrent to any adversary. Russia has shattered peace in Europe with its unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine. The destruction of the Kakhovka Dam today puts thousands of civilians at risk and causes severe environmental damage. This is an outrageous act which demonstrates once again the brutality of Russia's war against Ukraine. NATO is not party to that war, but we help Ukraine uphold its right to self-defense, which is enshrined in the UN Charter. And I thank Slovakia for providing significant humanitarian and military support to Ukraine. We must continue to support Ukraine so it can prevail as an independent and sovereign state in Europe. Because if President Putin wins, the message to him and to other authoritarian leaders will be that they can use force to achieve their goals and challenge other neighbours' borders. That will make all of us more vulnerable. At the B9 meeting today, we prepared a NATO summit, which will take place in Vilnius in July. At that summit, I expect allies to agree a multi-year package of assistance so that Ukraine transitions from Soviet-era doctrines, training and equipment to NATO standards, and to help it move closer to the alliance. All allies agree that NATO's door remains open, that Ukraine will become a member of NATO, and that this is a decision that only allies and Ukraine can make. Russia does not have a right to veto NATO enlargement. Prime Minister, we also discussed other issues on the summit agenda, including further bolstering our deterrence and defence, with new defence plans, more troops at high readiness, and stronger command and control. This will help Slovakia and all allies to strengthen their deterrence and defence and make us all more safe, and our alliance stronger. So thank you again. I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Ďakujem pekne. Máme priestor pre niekoľko otázok. Nech sa páči, prvá.
We have room for a few questions. Bloomberg, Daniel Hornak. I would like to ask both gentlemen, and especially Mr. Stoltenberg, if you have any information about the incident with the Kakhovka Dam could be indeed attributed to Russia, and what impact it could have on the war development.
Well, the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam demonstrates the brutality of this war, and it's a direct consequence of the war of aggression that President Putin in Moscow has launched against Ukraine. And we know that thousands of civilians are at risk because of the flooding, which is taking place as we speak. And then we also know that the flooding causes severe environmental damage. So this is an outrageous act, and it just demonstrates that the war that President Putin decided to launch against Ukraine is totally unacceptable and a blatant violation of international law.
Nech sa páči, ďalšia otázka.
Mr. Stoltenberg, chcem sa vás spýtať,
I would like to ask Mr. Stoltenberg whether you have heard that the leader of the Slovak opposition accused NATO from interfering with our election campaign. So have you heard about it? And if yes, what is your position on that?
So what I can say is that NATO conducts different information campaigns in different NATO allies. That's a normal thing. We have done many, many times before, also in Slovakia, and not so many years ago. So that's part of agreed activities by all allies to inform about NATO activities, NATO positions. And it's a transparent activity. It's something we do in full coordination with the national authorities. And of course, NATO is there to protect democracy, to protect freedom and openness. We will never go into domestic political issues, but we are there to protect the right of every nation to have their own democratic processes.
Ak by som mohol teda k tomu niečo dodať, že
If I may add something to that, I personally, I don't know why there is such a history around that, because basically this type of activities, the communication activities, are happening in all countries quite regularly. There is nothing secret about it. It's not something that would not be disclosed. The similar activities are done by the European Commission that tries to persuade citizens in all countries about the advantages of EU. So the same thing can happen and does happen in NATO countries. So I don't understand the history because these events take some time. So before we have the open tender and everything, then there would be after the election. So I doubt that, or I have absolutely no reason to think that NATO would meddle with our elections in any way. But of course, we are a democracy, so anyone can raise their own opinion. But it's probably it's quite strange if someone is saying that they are pro-NATO and at the same time doing everything against NATO. The last question, if I may. A question for both gentlemen. How do you see it, or how do you see the protection of Slovak airspace in the future, and what would replace Patriots?
First of all, I think we need to remember that NATO is there to protect all allies against any threats. And if we see a danger, if we see a threat, then NATO will be there. As we have been protecting the airspace and the NATO territory for decades. We have increased our presence also in Slovakia, now with a new NATO-led multinational battlegroup. We have NATO planes patrolling the skies of Slovakia to help you protect your airspace. And of course, if there is a need, this can also then be turned into support of air defense activities. And then we have an Italian SAMP-T air defense battery deployed in Slovakia. And Germany is also handing over 2 Mantis anti-aircraft systems to Slovakia. But the most important message is that the fact that we are increasing the readiness of forces, that we have the ability to quickly reinforce if needed. If there is a need, of course, we will quickly then add to the capabilities which are already in Slovakia, the battlegroup, the air defense systems, the air policing. We will add to that more capabilities if needed, because the whole idea of NATO is that we are one for all for one. and we do what is needed to protect all allies, also the airspace of all allies. If I just can add one brief thing on the previous question, we had a similar campaign in Slovakia in 2017. So there's nothing new, it's nothing abnormal. We have these kind of campaigns in many countries, and we have also had it in Slovakia not so many years ago in 2017.
Len v krátkosti k tej poslednej otázke. To je tá veľká výhoda byť...
Just very briefly to answer your last question, this is the advantage of being a member of NATO. Of course, we are not speaking about whether Banská Bystrica under central Slovakia is vulnerable or Trenčín would be vulnerable, because we are one country. And when we are a member of NATO, we are one alliance. So it doesn't make sense really to speak about the protection or air policing of the Slovak airspace. We need to speak about the protection of the entire airspace of the NATO alliance. So we have to consider it all together and not separately. Thank you for coming, and have a nice day.